Hello and welcome to our symposium on the Big Five across cultures. Thank you to the Association for Research and Personality for this opportunity, for this honor to organize this symposium. And thank you especially to Aranda and Joanne and to my co-presenters, all of whom really made this process of preparing the symposium a pleasure and a chance to learn more from each other. I hope that you also will enjoy these talks and that they'll give you good things to think about and ideas to bring to our discussion on July 16th. And I guess we'll be talking about these ideas a little more also on July 23rd. I'm going to give a few words of introduction and context, and then I'll introduce our speakers. So as you probably already know, psychological science is biased. In our recent analysis of where did the first authors and the samples come from over a 5-year period for 6 of the top cited journals in different domains of psychology, this includes JPSP, we found that 70% of them were American and almost all the rest were from Europe and other English-speaking countries. So a full 93, 94% of first authors and samples came from Western industrialized contexts. But we know that these contexts account for only 11% of the world's population. So this means that 89% of the world, the majority world, is really not well accounted for in psychological science. Addressing this is important for a lot of different reasons, for scientific and intellectual reasons, also for professional reasons, and for moral ones. When we look at this problem broken down by the 6 different journals we looked at, and for JPSP by the 3 editorially independent subsections, we see that our area, personality processes and individual differences, just manages to be the least Western industrialized of the whole group. And even within those Western industrialized contexts, you see that compared to other JPSP sections, we have really good representation of people from Europe. So significantly less American than those other sections. This isn't surprising. Personality psychology has included an international focus for a long time. For example, Lou Goldberg's high impact 1981 article here laid out a vision for using lexical work to discover what is universal in personality concepts across languages. Lou Goldberg's extremely influential lexical study in English in 1990 that supported the Big Five as the optimal solution for personality structure was quickly followed by studies in German and Dutch, which confirmed it. And this useful model has stood the test of time pretty well. It has a lot of predictive validity. There's been thousands of studies using it. But it's not a model that arose spontaneously across contexts. I want to emphasize that the cross-cultural evidence for the Big Five has been very overstated. And I really want to take a moment to reflect on that and what it means for personality science. For one thing, a 5-factor model already existed when these initial lexical studies were completed. Even Goldberg's initial 1990 study was more confirmatory than exploratory. As you all know, there's a lot of pressure on the field to come to a consensus model, and this played a role in some of the decisions that were made. Lexical studies can provide a really powerful and a systematic approach to combine emic and etic elements in a study. You can build a model from the ground up, not imposing anything. And in that way, you can find out what are the most relevant characteristics here in this population. And you can quantitatively compare those to models from the outside, like the Big Five, see how well those models replicate. But a lot of the history of lexical studies was only looking for the Big Five, in many cases not even using quantitative tests, just visual comparison. And very rarely have lexical studies included the emic exploration that is a potential for these studies. There's just been very little of building models from the ground up. So this is where I would say that the cup has been half empty and half full in personality psychology. We have data from many contexts and many languages available to us, but we haven't always let that data speak. We haven't always let it tell us much about these different places. Furthermore, the studies that have made the most dramatic claims about the universality of the Big Five have just exported a translated measure of the Big Five, of a Big Five inventory, NEO, BFI, and then said, okay, we recovered the factor structure. This is just configural invariance. And these studies include no way to find out what personality variables they might be missing in those contexts. We're learning nothing from those new cultures, despite all the effort that's gone to translate these inventories and collect data in other places. Besides that, this configural invariance, this is a standard that many personality measures can meet, including, for example, the Chinese personality assessment inventory, which you'll hear more about. This is not a particular value of the Big Five. This is not that special. And so I want to wrap up here by emphasizing this take-home point, which is the difference between exporting a measure to someplace else, exporting a trait of interest to someplace else, and between discovering that trait in a population. I think because people are so similar all over the globe, you can take a trait that's considered important in one place, it's been talked about so much that it's been coded into a single word in one context, and you can bring it somewhere else. So an example I like to use for that is this word from the Japanese, ame, which has to do with someone who behaves a certain way in a particular relationship. So they act maybe younger than they are, kind of seeking to be indulged, to be babied a little bit. And this can have a positive sense of creating intimacy and coziness in a relationship, but it can also have a negative sense of maybe taking advantage of someone. So once I've read about that construct and heard about it, I can start using it. It makes sense to me. I can think of people I know who behave this way more or less often. But it's not exactly from here. And knowing that this came from Japan can potentially tell you something quite interesting about the society there. So these are the two things that are true. You can import it. You can import something from somewhere else, or you can export the Big Five to somewhere else. We can understand it. It's not the same as having arisen spontaneously there. And in some recent papers, we've talked about extroversion as probably being like this. It's a very visible, a very relevant trait in North America. We talk about it a lot. We have a lot of contexts that elicit differences in extroversion, like interacting with strangers. And we have a very rich vocabulary to talk about subtle differences in extroversion. And then we can export it to other places, but in a lot of other contexts, it doesn't seem to be arising so spontaneously. There's not so many words for it. It's not quite as interesting and relevant. And Ted is going to talk about openness in this regard also. So again, my take-home message here is yes, we can export personality traits, and this will work to an extent. But what do we gain by doing that, and what do we lose? So here's how we're going to address this topic today. So first, Ted Schwabe is going to take a deep dive into the dimension of openness and look at where that dimension came from and how it works across contexts. And then we're going to hear reports from some different parts of the world. Sumaya Laher is going to talk about the Big Five in South Africa, how it works there, how it doesn't, and what local alternatives have been proposed. White Sao Fan is then going to address really similar questions about the Big Five in Chinese and what needs to be added to it to perhaps make it work better. Pia Zainoun is going to address similar issues and also talk about more emic models from the Arab Levant. Unfortunately, due to circumstances, she was not able to record her talk, but her slides are very detailed. So we just are silently showing those slides, and they give a lot of leads to other papers and work if you are interested in following up on that. And then finally, I'm going to talk about emic models, lexical studies in 3 different languages in sub-Saharan Africa. So we really hope you enjoy these talks, and we very much look forward to hearing your thoughts, your feedback, your questions at the discussion periods. Thanks for attending our talks.